I was just informed that the people watching can't hear the audio.
They should be able to hear now. I mean, I can read out names on the phone that I've got. I've got Alison Phillips, Christina Yepidar, Hadley Manning, Isabel Cruz, Lindsay Pagoda, Stephanie Knoll.
So what? Thank you. Thank you for being on behalf of So yes. Yeah. So, next call. Document what the department needs to use in order to get those times. So, we document members. We have responsible yes. And so when you are charged $5.50, which we need to get some
take that actuary analysis and forms a final recommendation. So what we need now is we have a draft of the solicitation that we want to put forth to retain those actuary services. And so we're asking for the task force members to provide feedback on the draft solicitation by no later than July 26th, such that we can then release the solicitation by July 31st, and then ultimately we feel like there's going to need to be a Q&A session in this process, which is needs to be accounted for, so that'll happen in mid-August. And we want to award that contract by September 30th, such that they will have a period of time before they get the task force, so they can do sort of a market landscape analysis, and then get the task force recommendation, and then produce something for this group to consider by no later than November 27th. So I threw a lot of dates at you. I tried to color code the action needed for the task force members. You have, I should mention this, in your packet, on the right-hand side, the current document on the right-hand side, you will see a roster of the task force members. On the back of that are key dates and deliverables for when we need to. Any questions on these?
You can just do it. It's just that we're not going to get audio. Any of the live stream will turn off.
Okay, thanks. So there's that. And we'll do our absolute best to continue to push communication to you with clarity around what we need from you, by when, etc. And if at any point things go a little bit quiet, something's probably wrong. So raise your hand. We're going to, again, use email as our primary method of communication. If there's an alternate method or some kind of accommodation that you all require in order to meet the deadlines,
your passcode is confirmed.
wonderful. All right, so let's have a little bit of chat about governance. Good news, we're 12 minutes ahead of schedule.
Huh? Have you signed it on that?
So,
I can't.
you all have been selected very thoughtfully. Your job is four things. First, we need you to participate actively. Each of you plays a specific role. We don't have a ton of duplication, right? So, what we need is for you to provide expertise and representation for the group that you represent. Second, we need you to ask clarifying questions, and early. We want to drive shared understanding. We're coming at this challenge from a number of different places and with different banks of historical knowledge. So we need to drive questions early, and we think it's very reasonable to varying opinions. But these things work really well when you do respectful challenge, right? You say, I see where you're going with that, but what about this? And if we use that question method, I think we're going to get to the crux of things faster. Third, if you have any concerns at any point in time, you should reach out to me. My contact details are the last page in here, and I'll happily share cards with you all. If there are anything about how this is being run, you need to let me know. And then last, we may need you to perform some independent work between the sessions in order to inform that next meeting. We may reach out to you. We're going to be as respectful as we possibly can with your time, while also not missing the ball, right? This is a very important and very important tasking that you've been given, so we want to make sure we get it right. The department, so this is CDLE staff. They're going to drive, Sherry Ashley is going to talk to us in a little bit about procuring services. We've got expert opinion from a number of places, and they're responsible for that. Synthesizing information and materials. Admira and Jeff have done a wonderful job so far, and it's going to stay challenging because the body of knowledge is large. Third thing, when we have topics that arise that are challenging to navigate, the department will help us with that. They have the resources to do so, and they've been tasked with that obligation. They're going to liaise between the task force members and the vendors. So in order for the vendors to do their job, they need consistent guidance, so we'll ask that you funnel all requests that would end up being placed onto the vendor through the department. Documenting your recommendations in final and initial reports. So the drafting engine is inside CDLE staff. They're simply serving a role as required by the act. Right? They are a muscle to help you all get your work done, but they are commissioned to play that role. Here's the role I'm asked to play. Right? Provide a structured approach so that all the meetings that you have are effective ones. And if we have issues, we get to the root cause of those as quickly as possible. I'll try to keep you focused and progressing towards your goals, driving to that tight timeline. That's a partnership. You all need to raise issues so that we can structure those dialogues in a productive fashion. As relevant data and research comes up, I'll help with the representation of that. Because sometimes when you get something that's real text heavy, you should count on me to try to do some of what Jeff was doing earlier, which is make it graphical so that we can all understand it. And last, and probably this is the most important job that I have, is to make sure that you all have a chance to participate actively and openly. We need balanced perspectives. We come to this point because we've taken a run at this, and there's a lot of very valid perspective that needs to be balanced in order to make those recommendations that have a chance of actually becoming a law. Right? So those are the roles. Does that seem about right? Are there any suggestions for modifying that so that we kind of know what to expect from each other? Okay. Looks good. All right, the last thing here, and it's stuck down in the bottom, and I don't know if you can read it from where you are, but meeting cadence. So we're going to propose that we set a fixed monthly meeting, and then as we have need for offline work, and these three ladies are going to tackle something to bring to the task force, we can schedule those independently, but we'd like to establish a timeline, a cadence. And rather than use all of your time right now to look at calendars, we're going to send a doodle poll. We're going to say third Thursday, second Tuesday. Figure out which cadence works for you all. All right? So we'll do that right after this meeting so that we can get that August meeting calendar. The duration of these meetings, though, won't always be 3 hours. It may be 1.5 or it may be 5. It's going to depend a lot on the work to be done. So we'll ask for that flexibility, and we'll ask that we block an entire day. And know that's a monumental ask. But we're going to try to do that so that we have enough time to look each other in the whites of the eyes and get to the root of things. Not that thing that we do often, which is we have a 45-minute dialogue on something and we agree to talk for 45 minutes again next month. Right? So, are you all okay, show of thumbs, Are you all okay with the idea of a monthly planned meeting with additional work sessions as we need? Yeah? Cool. Thank you. Participation guidelines. This is one of those things that goes without saying. I think we'd ask that everybody on the phone have a little bit of patience with the technology. It doesn't always work perfectly, and I apologize for that. For the benefit of those on the phone, though, in the room, if you, every time you speak, just say your name, right? I'm Diana Petrick, boom. That way everybody can place a name with a face. We've got the live stream going on. I don't know how effective it is. I don't know if they can see your name placards. So that's one thing. Second, please be brief and stay on topic. Goes without saying, but there are a lot of very bright people with important perspectives, and so we need to get to the heart of it. For those in the room, including those in the audience, and you're doing a wonderful job so far, no crosstalk. It really jacks up the phone. People can't hear what's going on because they hear papers rustling or somebody whispering. The microphones just can't resolve that. Okay? And also, please silence your device. Those of you who are on the phone, okay, and I suspect that while we would always want everybody to be here in person, we're always going to have some contingent who are on the phone. So what we'd ask is, signal your desire. We've got somebody managing the dashboard, if you will. Yeah, so signal your desire to speak. We'll call it out and send the attention to you. Please use mute when you're not speaking. You're doing a good job of that so far. And last, make sure you participate in the discussion. So we've got Dana and Hadley on the line right now. It's challenging to do that, but please develop a sharp elbow and get your voice heard. Logical guidelines. So I mentioned earlier, my job is to make sure we get a balanced perspective. I'm going to take these very seriously. And so if I feel like somebody is dominating, I may say, well, hang on. You know, we need to hear from some others. I may send it to the phone, even if they don't have any comments, just to confirm that that doesn't mean they're having a challenge to participate. Okay? So with your permission, I'll facilitate actively to try to drive us. All right? All right, voting procedures. Let's talk about voting procedures, and then maybe we'll vote on them. Okay, here's another proposal, and you'll find that that's how we operate. So we're going to propose things. It doesn't mean we're certain it's correct. It just means that we shouldn't start from zero on something that probably has a logical format or a logical structure. Here's what I'd suggest. We're going to recap proposals or recommendations, and then we're going to poll you. Where are you parked on that one? Are you for that? Are you against it? Do you need more information? What information do you need, Lydia? You know, and drive the discussion that way. So no formal vote initially, but polling is what I don't want to do is something that, again, it's another one of those human challenges, which is, I agree with Kathy, and then you talk for another 3 minutes. If we are all in agreement, let's get past that so that we can spend time on the places where we're not in agreement, right? We'll engage in additional discussions to answer those questions, then we'll ask you to vote. All in person, we'll just maybe use hands, but we have to make sure that we get a vote on record from everybody who's on the phone. Cool? And then we'll record the result of the vote. We'll document minority opinions where strong feelings remain. Right? There's an opportunity here to pursue consensus, what we can all live with. So I have a couple of questions for you, though, related to voting procedures, and then I'm going to ask whether you all like this. So, first, is a simple majority sufficient, or should we require a higher percentage? Right? 51% is not that high a bar. Should we require a higher percentage of that? What are your thoughts? And again, please repeat your name each time you speak. What's the right percentage is the question.
This is Stacy. I think it should be higher than the majority. And I say that given the work I think that's already been done on this particular bill, but I think if we got higher than the majority, it's not, we hopefully wouldn't be backtracked. We'll be making a decision moving forward.
Thanks, Stacey. Edwin?
Yes, Edwin Zoe.
My feeling on voting, I don't know if it's possible, but it depends on the importance of the issue. It is a very serious matter. It's really behooves us to have a higher bar to clear. It is relatively mundane issue. I think 50% of some majority is more than sufficient. Interesting. Other perspectives on this one? Would you want to use the microphone so that people can hear? Okay. Other perspectives, or does somebody want to plan a bar? Kathy?
I think that, well, I agree that the goal would be to get a higher percentage of consensus and agreement. I think that we have a relatively short time and we need to move forward, and we're coming from very different perspectives, as you mentioned. So it may not be realistic to get to that higher bar. What happens if we don't get to that higher bar? Do we just not make a decision on that? So I'm actually okay with as long as there is a robust discussion and everybody feels like their perspective is heard, and I feel like 51% of single vote is probably okay, given the time constraints that we have and the perspectives that we have.
Okay. Other thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I agree if the goal is consensus and that's what we're striving for, and there's an opportunity to share information, including if there is documenting minority opinions, that given the time frame, I agree.
It's
The complexity and the need to be able to move forward, that simple majority is the best way to meet what we think is
live stream as well.
this legislation.
Best.
Question, it's the first time I've been on a task force like this. I'm fine with a simple majority, I think that moves things along, but is there a standard that's a group like this with this kind of decision making?
I would ask if any of you have that experience. The answer is not in my experience. Each group needs to agree upon their own. I would say that what Kathy mentioned of documenting the minority opinion is a better practice. Because if something got 60%, there's still quite a bit of feeling around the alternative, and so that alternative needs to be documented faithfully to may inform future discussions. Does anybody else know of a standard? All right, how about Hadley or Dana? Any opinion on this particular point?
Dana just texted me because he's having issues with his microphone, but he said if we were looking for consensus, 51% is too low. He'd suggest 80%.
80%. Okay. So we've got 2 points here. We've got 51% for practicality, and we've got 80% recognizing that that probably means that you've got some momentum behind you. Anybody want to pick up on that? Go ahead, Judith.
Yeah, I think as well, I agree that I guess with like the voting, like what are we going to vote on? I think that if there's some recommendations, and just again for the complexity, there's a lot of details, and take that in medical leave policy. So I would agree that 51%, just a little bit of the majority, that would be helpful.
A little louder, please.
Oh, yeah, just again, because of the complexity, and I agree with the timing, I think that it would make sense to 51% would be ideal.
Okay.
Just for clarification, there are 13 voting members on the task force, so as you're throwing out 51% or 80%, keep that in mind.
Okay. So let's demonstrate a little bit of quick polling. Who's parked at the idea of 51% being sufficient given the size of our task? If we could just signal with your hand. Okay. So about half. How about on the phone? Dana, you've already shared your point. Hadley? 51% or something higher?
Hi, can you guys hear me if I
There we go.
speak?
We can now.
Can you hear me if I speak?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, can you hear us?
Oh, there we go.
we can hear both of you.
There's a bit of a delay. I apologize for that. This is Hadley, and I apologize. I'm not there in person. I'm on a family vacation this week, and so the timing of our first meeting was unfortunate for me. But I'm happy that I have this opportunity going remotely. I guess I'm a little unclear about are we talking about the voting procedure for everything? We're talking about a voting procedure just for specific recommendations? Are we talking about the voting procedure for the final group of recommendations? I'm sorry I joined a little late because I had some technical issues, but if you could clarify what we're voting on. And I don't know if it's possible, but maybe different voting thresholds make sense for different levels, depending on the importance of what we're voting on. I understand we're going to, the final report will have various dimensions, and maybe some of those dimensions we need a greater level of consensus, and some other pieces the simple majority will do, but that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, thank you. So quick summary, she had an initial question, which is, are we talking about all things or only the final? Right. So what I would suggest is, these things tend to result in a series of recommendations, right? It's not a single recommendation. Each of them has its own weight. I wonder if, in practical terms, we're ever going to get to consensus on all dimensions. I think that might be unlikely. It's an awfully high bar. So, what if we simply, if we say that this discussion is around discrete recommendations that form the components of a broader package? Okay? Does that help for clarity in terms of what we're asking is, with 51% on each recommendation adequate, or do we need a higher bar? Go ahead.
Tara McKinnish. So I'm going back to the piece that we actually have 13 members on the task force.
Yep.
And so that means if we say 51% bar, we're talking 7 of the 13. I would be inclined to push it to 8 out of the 13 members to feel like we're not just on the razor's edge if possible, unless the group feels that we just find that we can't function.
Quick math says that's about 70%, right? Not quite the 80 that was proposed earlier by Dana, but so let's see. Who likes that suggestion? 7 members, 7 of 13, or excuse me, 8 of 13. Show of hands. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Good.
Not quite 8.
Yeah. Yeah. Not quite 8 yet.
So looking at procedural, do we know there are 16 dimensions that are specific to the task that the task force is charged with in legislation? So eligibility, duration of funding, wage replacement. Should that vote be higher than just procedural issues? And like we're gonna like leadership now today, that could be simple majority. But when we get to things that are components of a benefit package, you look at a higher age, like you were suggesting.
And Chairman Kinch, to clarify, when I said the 8L13, I was following up on the initial comment that I thought was saying that this was for things that were these specific pieces of the recommendations. I agree completely. For basic procedural matters, it should definitely be a basic majority vote.
So let's ask again then, with that clarification, procedural matters, simple majority, let's keep this thing rolling. The specific recommendations, 8 of 13. So that's the recommendation on the table. Who likes that idea? Show of hands. Can you raise them high for me, please? Okay, Dana's on the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whose part's still back at simple majority for all?
I just have a question.
Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
This is Kathy with CFI. So if we have a proposal on eligibility and we fail to meet the 8th threshold, right, on any of the proposals, what happens? Do we just not discuss eligibility, or do we leave that out of the recommendations that we provide to the actuary? Because then they're not able to do their job. And so I just, like I said, I just feel like I recognize the need to get to consensus and to have this body put out something that is going to be more that it's gonna be looked at as this was a valuable process, but I also feel like that could be done if we have something that allows us to practically move forward, and that, as you noted, we just note that there was not consensus on this issue, or there was a great deal of disagreement, and when we finally get to the final product, I mean, I think it's practical to assume, or pragmatic to assume, that we're gonna have something that not everybody loves, and that is gonna come, that transparency is gonna come with that disclosure. I think as long as we're transparent about where we are on these things, and as a group, and we are clear with everybody who's following this process, that allows us to stay on task and to get through to January 8th. That's my feeling. So.
Thanks, Kay. Jeff?
Yeah, in response to Kathy's question, I just wanted to clarify, and this may not be helpful, but I just want to clarify what the bill includes versus what it doesn't include. It actually is silent in terms of the initial recommendation and the final recommendation. It's actually silent on what variables the group needs to put forth for consideration. To Kathy's point, though, the less variables you make decisions on, the less robust and accurate an analysis would be, an actuary analysis would be. But I just wanted to clarify that it's actually silent on, you don't need to make recommendations necessarily on all 16 variables. It's silent on that matter.
Hey, Hadley, we're gonna give you just a second for the delay to catch up, but you wanted to chip in, go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm trying to listen on the phone, and I can't hear the facilitator at all.
I appreciate the sort of dividing out of both about things that are less important or procedural and the actual recommendations themselves. I think 8 out of 13 is not a very high bar. I think it's actually closer, as my calculator, it's 61%, so it's still not very strong majority. And I think if there are recommendations that we can to majority, then maybe it's worthwhile to revisit those things. That's sort of a check on finding some level of consensus. And if there are pieces, dimensions that we can get 60% on in a reasonable time frame, then if there's no requirement to make a strong specific recommendation, maybe we can just include some discussion on those topics in our final set of recommendations. So, anyway, those were just my 2 cents, and if 8 out of 13 were going to vote for the recommendation, I would vote yes.
Okay, thanks. It was a little bit challenging, Hadley. It didn't 100% come through. Does anybody want to pick up on her train recognizing that 8 of 13 is in the 60-some% range? Stacy?
This is Stacy Campbell again. I guess I could go with is it Tara, with kind of her proposal. I think it will be important for both sides, all sides, to have some type of documented report that recognizes the minority opinion. So, if we're not in agreement on something, I think we need to be able to show whoever this goes to that these are the people who were not in agreement on it. So, and I don't know if there is some formal procedure for a minority report, but that would be, I guess, my recommendation.
Yeah. To my knowledge, there's no formal procedure. It doesn't prescribe exactly how the report should look. But I've written these in the past where you simply say, look, this opinion is represented by the majority.
Excuse me, can you all hear those of us on the phone?
Yes, we can.
So those on the phone that aren't members
I'm sorry.
So those on the phone that aren't members of the task force should move to the live stream, because that audio quality is going to be a lot better.
The live stream still says stand by waiting for live stream.
The live stream on the YouTube link.
Okay, where do I get that?
famli.cdle.co. You'll see the link right at the bottom.
Okay, thank you. And for those of us who are on the phone, I can hear everyone except the facilitator, so that makes it hard to follow the conversation.
Is it better now? How about if I stand here? Does that improve the quality? I'm gonna make an assumption that it does. All right. Yeah. So, let's see where we have agreement. Simple procedural issues. Who's okay with 51%? Just move it on. Keep your hands up, hold them high. Awesome. So that looks like consensus. Okay. So for the significant recommendations, there are the 16 dimensions, right? And I don't know the practicalities of addressing each of them, but I know that they were included in the act for a reason. So on those, who believes 8 or more should represent a majority opinion, any fewer than 8, and we recognize both dominant opinions? Is that reasonable? Is that reasonable guidance, or does it set us up downstream for, well, you can't actually ask you don't have infinite money for the actuary in Kathy's example, right? So you can't ask them to model every possible variable with no clear direction, okay? So does anyone have a proposal to advance, and we'll see where people, how people feel?
Are you asking for a motion?
Am I?
We don't really have parliamentary procedure in place, but I just call it a proposal.
Well, I do have a comment to make. Is
Sure.
that the part that I'm conflicted about is that I realize that we have stakeholders from across the spectrum.
Sure.
Of Colorado, and not knowing people's intentions. Sometimes, coming into the situation where I say that 2/3 majority is a fairly reasonable number to ask, which is 8. And but if we have people, stakeholders who is not open-minded to the type of process and observance of the greater good, then that would influence my decision making in terms of whether it's a simple majority versus maybe 2/3, which I think 2/3 A is a reasonable number to ask of the organization, but not knowing the dynamics of the group makes it very difficult for me to jump into that.
Yeah.
Edwin's though, by the way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Jared Mink. I think, a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think one is that this is set out as an implementation task force, and so I think that's important to keep in mind that, this body was created looking at the legislation in order to implement a proposal and issue recommendations and to get the actuarial, feedback on recommendations that are proposed. And I mean, looking at this list, each of these impacts the actuarial assessment of what legislation would look like. So, I'm comfortable with documenting minority opinions and diversity of opinions among this group. I think that's important to, just make sure the public debate reflects that. But I think in order for us to meet the requirements here and to be able to get an actuarial assessment that looks at what a program that we do need to reach a recommendation on all of these points. So while I would seek something that looks like 8, I think the ability to have a mechanism where we're able to move forward if that's not possible, so we can at least get an actuarial assessment, is kind of key to this entire process and central to the legislation itself.
Thanks, Jared. So Dana from the phone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Small victories.
Hi, everybody. I really apologize that I couldn't make it up there today. I will be able to do that hopefully going forward in the future. My personal opinion would be I do like the 8 out of the 13. I think it's better, closer to consensus. I believe whatever we're trying to do should be reflective of the group. And sometimes 51%, it's hard to say that we've got consensus. I do like documenting where we get stuck, but I think overall the goal should be to try and come to consensus. And never been through a process like this before, but I'm thinking that we're all going to have to be curious as we approach different ideas of our own, and keep focused on what's best for the state. So if we do that, I'm hopeful that in most things we can get the bar of consensus that we're trying to get to.
Thanks, Dana. Stacy?
This is Stacy Campbell again. I think as I look at it, I mean, it's not that we're going to get to one point and we're just stopped. Oh, we can't make a decision. It's a compromise. And so once we get there, I think it's us going back to the table and saying, okay, well, you didn't want to give here, but what if we did here, here? And we're going to come to a decision, I think, that's going to be, and not everybody's going to get what they want, but I don't think that it is just one vote and, oh, we didn't decide, so therefore we can't move on. It is a compromise, and everybody's going to have to give a little bit in order for us to get to where we need to be. And at the end of the day, nobody is going to probably be 100% satisfied with this bill, but we have something that I think is, we've moved it forward, we've all put in our opinion, and we've made the best decision that we can for the state of Colorado, and I think that is all we need to be doing here. So I think the recommendation at 8 of 13 makes sense with the understanding that we're never going to just stop and say, okay, well, we didn't make a decision, so we can't move forward.
Thanks, Stacy. Diana?
Diana Petrek. I am comfortable with the 8 out of 13, but I think it's also important to recognize the those 5 who cannot come to that consensus. And I think there's a lot of information there, and that is, after all, why we were here. So I don't know what that would look like, but I'd be curious to know how we would make sure that information is there.
Kathy?
Kathy White, CFI. So were you suggesting earlier, Greg, that we go with the 8 when we can get there, and when we can't get there, that we go with the 2 top majority solutions? So like, I don't even know what we would, I'm not sure, like, I'm trying to think of an example of what that would be like, but so if we can't come to if we can't determine that this is the eligibility criteria that we want to give to the actuary, and there's another proposal, like, so it shouldn't be all of these people, it should be some subset of these people, and we can't get to 8 on either of those proposals, but we give then both of them to the actuary to model both of them. Is that what you were suggesting earlier? Yes?
I think that would be practical in some cases. In other cases, the actuary will say, I can't do all of the things you've asked. I can only do some of the things that you've asked. So let's look at this as an interim proposal. It looks like we have consensus on the idea of procedural matters being 51%. I think the spirit that Stacy described of continuing to drive and pursue compromise is in the room, right? The other thing that I would suggest is maybe we simply agree that 8 is the target. We try to drive toward 8 when we can get past there through good discussion, but otherwise we simply document where we have the range of opinions. So I posed the question. I'm not certain that I have a clean answer for you, or that it's necessary that you get to 8 on all. But we know that it's important to have clear direction to the contractors, and that's why it becomes, because you're actually committing a resource and taking one swing at the ball. So are you all okay with the idea of pursuing 8 and recognizing when we have the opportunity to have 2 different scenarios evaluated, we'll request that. When we don't, we simply document the alternative proposal or proposals.
This is Kevin Duncan. I think what Kathy's point is, that would come out of the analysis anyway. We're going to ask a researcher to analyze some data, and we would probably say, it's the nature of it, to say, we want to try this, we want to try that, can you look at that? I don't think we need to vote on that.
Okay.
I also think the amount of time that we've spent on this issue, demonstrates we have a potential problem with moving forward. So I'm thinking that what it ought to be is simple majority documenting minority views and move forward. Because we have a deadline and we gotta move forward.
Okay, so Kevin phrased it like a proposal, simple majority, with the spirit that Stacy reflected earlier, which is try to pursue more than that simple majority, but operate with the simple majority as being sufficient. Show of hands. Okay, we're only at about half of the group, folks. So I take your meaning though, Kevin. I don't know how much longer this would be productive. Let me ask this let me offer an alternative. An alternative is we wait until we have something that's not procedural and we talk about what sufficient decision-making is, not in the abstract, but in the practical situation. You all okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah?
I think-
Yeah, but I'm afraid we can't talk without a specific example. We're probably seeing the world a bit differently. Whereas if we are actually talking about eligibility criteria, we will have a sense of where people are and how we could pursue that compromise. So simple majority for administrative. The first time we get to something that's starting to take the shape of a recommendation or would inform a commitment of resources, we reflect that opinion at the time. Okay with that? Show of hands, who's okay with that proposal?
Can I clarify a matter though?
Yeah, sure.
I only bring this up because it's of timely note, and that is that we were asking as a takeaway from this dialogue, from this meeting today, that's the we're asking as a takeaway today that the voting members need to make a decision on the experts that are going to be doing an analysis. So you're going to select 3 experts of a pool of experts. And so I'm just asking for clarifying purposes, which category does that fall into?
Majority.
That would be majority? Okay. I just want to make sure we're not tackling a fundamental issue in the next 2 weeks that we can't have a decision. Okay, very good.
All right. So, back to the discussion. We're at time. So this is the amount of time. I've allowed the conversation to continue a bit because it hasn't been preventing us from accomplishing the rest. Effective immediately, we actually are eating into time that's planned for other topics. So I'm going to push this back to you one more time. Who's okay with the idea of pursuing simple majority, documenting each time we have a decision where everybody was parked? Show of hands, who's okay with that proposal? Pam?
I'm sorry, on everything?
No, simply on the recommendations. So procedure is still 51%. But for the recommendations themselves, is it in fact the most prudent thing just to have a record of where each of you are parked? Yeah, go ahead.
So Hadley, because her service is a little shaky. I'd like to add that deliberating voting procedures is naturally harder than deliberating the issue itself. It's like forming the Constitution versus passing a law. That's what she says.
Yeah.
And Hadley, if you want to try to speak up now, you're more than welcome to.
So Greg asked
Heard
a
the
question
wisdom.
about part-time.
So my question one more time is, we've reached consensus on the idea of 51% being sufficient for procedural matters. For the recommendations themselves, are you okay with a structure that says we will pursue compromise such that the majority, or a super majority, if you will, are in alignment with it? So we'll carry that spirit forward, and then we will document, rather than worry about 51% versus 62%, we will simply document where each task force member voted, where their support lay, and in the cases where we have a significant body with a minority opinion, we will document that in the recommendation itself. Stacy?
In the spirit of compromise, what if we move to, on the key decisions, 7 of 13?
Well, let's test that. Key decisions, 7 of 13, rather than 8, simply go to 7, which is in fact your majority.
Majority. It's the same.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm on board with that.
Okay, so Dana just registered procedures 51, significant issues 8 of 13. I feel like we have no choice at this point, because we're not seeing any movement within folks, to wait until we have an issue that is non-procedural and pick it up at that point. Are you all okay with that? Okay?
Greg, just to clarify, like today we have 12 voting members, and so if we get to something to vote, 8 of 12, or is it 8 of 13? So that's why should it be percentages? Oh, because we would run into a problem today with 12 voters getting to 8, I think, on something that was sensitive. So I just want to make sure that, you know, I think we can move forward if we only have 12 or even 11 voting members present.
Yeah.
But that number 8 may prevent us from moving forward in the future if everyone can't be here or send a proxy with a vote. Like today we have someone that did attend. So I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that, so that we moving forward, it may be better to look at a percentage or some kind of number that's not attached to a raw number.
Dana from the phone?
Yeah, this is Dana. I would go, I think it was Stacy's idea on the 7 of the 13th as a way to compromise. I'll go to 7 of 13. That's 53%.
Not a compromise.
So
It's not good math.
Not that much more above 51, but I'm trying to be flexible. So
Yeah.
I think we should.
So, all right, Dana, thanks. So, show of hands, who's good with 7 of 13? Show of hands, 7 of 13? All right, that's getting close to it. I'm just gonna put a squash on this. Let's get to the first significant decision, and we'll find out where everybody is, and we'll see how that purpose or the spirit of compromise is working not in the abstract, but in the specific.
Real quick,
Edmund?
so real quick to Joe's point is that I think it's important for us to have a percentage rather than a set head count.
Okay.
In case there's an absence of attendees.
Yeah.
And absence of members.
So 7 of 13 is 50-some percent.
It is a percentage number, but I think we should just use a percentage.
Yeah.
It's stuck.
I think what we're finding is, by virtue of the number 13, 7 is 51% or more. Okay? So.
So we're saying just 51%.
51%, I think, is could be the rule.
Okay.
Let's actually get in. Let's find something meaty. Let's debate it. We'll find out where people are parked. Okay.
Chair and vice chair.
Second question on the table then is, will we allow designees to vote? So Sandra Parker Murray not with us today. If she had elected to send someone in her stead, is that person allowed to vote or not? Is it the person in name, or is it really the representation? Anybody have a perspective on that? Go ahead, Tara.
I do, because each of us are representing stakeholder groups. I think it's really important that a stakeholder group not be shut out simply because there was a conflict in the schedule. So I definitely would want the ability to do proxy votes.
Okay, show of hands, who's supportive of proxy votes? Hold them up, please. Okay, so those of you who don't have your hand up, what's the alternative?
This is Hadley. I am. I don't know if you can hear me.
You're supportive? In the room, we had several hands that weren't raised, so I was just directing it to them. but thank you for chiming in. What's the alternative? Judith?
Again, I guess it depends on just like the decision that's gonna be made. I think that part of it is around, like you gather information here and, it is around like if the person that is really has been following all the details and really has all the nuances for this information. So that's just my only concern, but I think if there's a commitment to prepare your member or your proxy, to vote.
Okay. So with that assumption that you would be working with your proxy to understand the issues, bring them up to speed, and also inform them casting that vote, does that change anyone's opinion about allowing proxy vote? So Jared, Kathy, I didn't see your hands.
I think that would be okay. I'm just thinking about other processes that I've gone through where you have a group of people who are really trying to come to kind of a foundational body of information. And as Judith said, that can get unwieldy when you have new people who come in. Again, our time is short, and so like, if I'm not here, if I prep somebody on my team to come in my place, that would be okay, but I feel like there's something to be said for having a conversation and making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and everybody is, we don't have to take the time to bring somebody up to speed who isn't there, and so I don't know. I guess I would be okay with, with it, as long as they're prepared, but, because I'm not sure what the alternative would be. Even if it's electronically or virtually, for people who are on this task force.
Jared, you're making movements of agreement.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not necessarily opposed. It's the same, and this is Jared make. I think just a similar concern with, we're going to be really digging in together and developing a working relationship, but also reviewing quite a bit of information from these third parties. So the sense of, just the mechanics of somebody else coming in who perhaps hasn't read any of the expert studies that are then informing our opinions is a concern if we're going to be voting based on that information. And the other thing that I was just toying with, and why I didn't raise my hand initially, is also, we were appointed to represent certain seats, and are there any, I was appointed to a workers' rights seat. Is my designee going to be somebody who also fits that perspective? So I think it's just how does somebody kind of come in, and do we ensure that they have the information that's necessary if we're allowing them to vote on something that this body has been discussing and really educating ourselves and debating and trying to reach a compromise? I guess that's the only mechanics concern that I have.
Yeah.
But I agree in spirit with the idea of making sure that our stakeholders are represented and that we can keep the process moving. That's just where the hesitation comes from.
So with the caveats that we would prepare people and make sure, with the caveat that we'll always provide an alternative method to physical attendance in the case that something happens to you. I'm sure emergencies will happen, with one more caveat, that is we're going to try our absolute best to find a recurrent time that works with all of your schedules. But you tend to end up on a task force like this because you're a busy person involved in a lot of interesting things. So with all of the caveats around trying to make sure that you all are here and that we have the consistency that promotes that nuanced compromise, you guys all okay with the idea of allowing a proxy vote in that odd case when we can? Show of hands. All right. Dana and Hadley on the phone are both in agreement. So thank you all. I appreciate your patience in working through that. That's hard but important. All righty. So, go ahead, Judith.
I think that Sandra from Communication with America.
Sandra Parker Murray in the room. Come and join us.
Come up.
I didn't want to be disruptive.
Oh,
Don't worry about that.
Oh gosh, no.
You're absolutely
Need a
welcome.
seat right here. Oh.
Sorry.
All right. So Dana and Hadley, we've got Sandra Parker Murray in the room. Great. Okay. So public comment. Admira, are you gonna take this one? All right.
All right, can everybody hear me this time?
Mhm.
Thank you, Greg, thanks, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. Oh, all right, so just very quickly, one of the sources of information that the task force will be asked to consider based on the Senate bill is public comments. The bill generally or broadly states that the task force is to receive and consider, starting September 1 or no later than September 1, public comments on the administration and enforcement of a paid family medical leave program. The only other prescriptive thing that the bill states regarding the public comments is that the public comment period has to be at least 30 days. That, as you can hopefully tell, is not a lot of information as to what kind of comments or what kind of feedback we should be gathering from the public. We, Jeff and I did create a draft, which is one of the pieces of information. Just gonna hold it up so you
Right
guys.
side of your folder,
It looks
I
like
believe
this.
it's the third one back, it looks like this. There's a little bit of yellow highlight on it.
So Jeff and I drafted that as the public comment notice that we intend to publish on the CDOE website and at the Colorado Registrar. We would like your feedback. We want to make sure that we receive the kind of comments or the information that would be most useful to the task force to inform your opinion, to help with the analysis, and inform the conversation that you all have together in the room. So we would ask that you please take a look at that draft and provide any additional questions or parameters you'd like included on that notice that we publish. We'd ask that you do that by July 31st. We have strict publication deadlines, at least for the Colorado Registrar. Website that we would be posting for the public to be able to actually access it and add their comments.
It needs to go out by the 31st. Do we need their comments a little bit earlier to be able to do that?
Actually, the comment, we don't. I have to submit the questions or the material to the Colorado Registrar no later than August 10th, but we would like a chance to review all of your comments and all your questions and make sure that we get it correct. So we would like maybe a few days there to just review what we receive. So if you just send it to me by email by July 31st, that should give us enough time to review that and get back to you if we have additional follow-ups. So any questions about that or any comments now? Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah.
All right, back on track. So, documented quote for actuarial analysis. Jeff, you're gonna take this one? Yes. Okay, so turning it over to Jeff Fitzgerald and Sherry Ashton.
Thank you. So as we discussed yeah, I guess it's not high enough. Okay, is that a little bit better? All right. So as we've discussed in some level of depth, the bill requires that we make a recommendation and then that we turn that recommendation over to an actuarial to do an analysis. We've drafted the documented quote solicitation, as we've talked about. Our target is to release that document by July 21st with responses due by August 30th from the vendors. Your help is needed in determining the content of the request. So again, within your packets, and Admira, if you can help them navigate as to where in your packet that document is.
It's on the right-hand side, and it looks like this. It just has a title at the top. It's about, right, I believe it's right after the public comment page.
So we have done our best with the somewhat limited guidance within the bill to create a draft document. But again, we want this to serve the purposes of the task force. So we need your help in rounding out the material within that. If time permits, and if we want to have a robust discussion on that draft, it will have to happen in closed session. But this is simply to introduce the topic, tell you that it's in your document, and to have you be clear that we need that feedback by July 26th, and you're to email that to me. Did you have someone to add to that, Sherry?
Doesn't look like a microphone. My name's Sherry Ashley, and I am actually the interim procurement director here. So what I want you to consider when you are actually making comments on this is this still is a closed process. So this is not for the public to be submitting comments to you on what is in this documented quote. We have to be very careful about who this is shared with, because if you actually share this with an actuarial service and they provide a whole bunch of comments back, they have been given an unfair advantage over other vendors. So we need to make sure that this is a fair process. So your comments really need to come from you and what you feel like this task force needs, not from other vendors and what they want to see in it. Does anybody have any questions on that? And if you do, you can contact me afterwards or during the break or the closed session, because I'll be with you then too.
I would only add that Sherry Ashley's contact information is also been provided within your packets on that cheat sheet that we talked about. Okay? All right, if there's no other questions, I think we're going to move to short public comment session. Joe, did you want to complete this?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for your patience in getting through, I guess, the storming and norming process of the task force this morning. So I think I want to thank you, Greg, for getting us to this point. Sherry, I just want to make sure that this document is for the task force members only.
Correct.
And we'll discuss it a little bit more in closed session after the break. So just want to reiterate that for procurement guidelines, we have to keep that to your eyes and for your input only at this time before it goes public for solicitation. I just do want to iterate before we go. Are there questions from any of you before we go to break on procedural issues that we can take from not only the task force members but from the audience that we have in the room or at large? We probably have time for a few questions. We do have a way for you to submit your questions virtually and online, and the answers will be posted on the website. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that if there's any questions or concerns you have, there is a way for you to get those questions so that we can answer them from the department and from the task force. I also want to mention we are going into closed session for leadership selection and also to discuss the procurement process for both the RFI that's out on the street as well as looking at the actuary RFI that will go out later this summer. And so that's why it needs to be a closed session.
All right, so does anybody in the back of the room, anybody representing the public wish to address the task force?
Hello, my name is Louise Meyerlin. I'm with the Women's Foundation of Colorado. And glad that I have the opportunity to be here in person today. Thank you all for your service. I am hearing from several members of the Women's Foundation community who wanted to listen online to hear more from all of you, that they had a very hard time accessing the information. And we appreciate the technology team's efforts to improve access throughout this meeting. Given that we are an entity that represents women and families across the entire state, we would very much like for access to be improved for future meetings, and thank you for your efforts to do so. Similarly, if there are documents in the task force members' packets that can be shared publicly, may I make a request that they can also be shared through the family.cble.co website. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Louise. Others? Anybody else?
Is this actually going to be published on the website later, correct?
The recording.
The recording, so
Yes.
for people that did have trouble today, it should be published later, so hopefully they will be able to hear it.
And the PowerPoint as well would be available?
Yeah, I think I don't believe there's anything in the PowerPoint that would prohibit us from publishing that as well. Others who'd like to address the task force? All right, well, seeing none, we're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so we'd ask that the public adjourn. We're gonna reconvene in closed session at 11:15 by the clock in the back. So thank you all for your attendance and your participation so far.
Actually,